Hi everybody and welcome back to the Southern Scouser. Today I have a very special guest to help me preview the Newcastle game. Good friend of mine, David. How you doing, mate?
I'm all right, mate. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, mate. Fellow football coach as well, so I'm sure we're going to have all the tactical discussions about it as well. And also a happy birthday to you, mate, as well. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, you're a sod, but thank you very much, Adam.
No, it's all good, mate. So yeah, obviously the main reason obviously is you're a Newcastle fan. I'm a Liverpool fan. We're really good mates.
Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get into the game. So, in terms of Newcastle season, mate, so far, just how have you found it? Did you expect to be where you are? What are your thoughts of Steve Bruce, etc.? Where do you find yourself as a fan at the minute?
Oh, it's one of those things where you just take a deep breath and you just go off. So, beginning of the season, I think most fans' expectations were a hope to stay outside the relegation places, put in some competitive performances. We made some decent signings over the summer for a club of Newcastle. We know the owner has moments where he splashes cash, but very often they haven't worked out. Callum Wilson, fantastic coming in. Quite excited by the likes of Richie and Hendrick. Thinking maybe 13th again, 14th again, comfortably, not causing ourselves some problems. Start of the season went very well, picking up some unexpected wins and some very, very difficult, hard-fought 0-0 draws or 1-1 draws. Almiron, who since he's come, I think has been incredibly underrated. I really, really like the guy, works very, very hard. Pick him in my team every week. Kicks the floor, falls over, loses the ball quite a lot, but that seemed to, for a good period of time, seemed to be fine. And then we had the injuries hit, and we were relying on championship type goal scorers and the likes of Gale and Carroll. And I think as we fell away, what started as potential in the season ended up being very much we're still playing the same way. We're playing with a back five or a solid back four, very little going forward. It almost felt every game setting up for a draw, trying to get the point out of it rather than 3 points. And as a Newcastle fan, excuse the accent, a bit like yourself, live a long, long way away. But the reason I follow Newcastle, and I always have, is the exciting football, is that aspiration to play attractive football. We don't care if we win or lose. We want to win, but we don't care. We want the performance on the pitch. So for a good 3-4 months of the season, we've played out some fairly boring games, looking to hold off. And it's no surprise we are where we are, although it's looking a lot better now. 8 points clear of Fulham, still got a game in hand. There is the reality as well that others are picking up some points, but generally results are going our way. Bookies today got us down to 1-66 odds for relegation, which
that's good.
It was 30-1 last week. So that's changed dramatically with the win at the weekend. But again, it's kind of the same story. Promise, potential, opportunities. We go into games and with some where we play very attacking, we cause a lot of problems. We get quite excited as Newcastle fans. The Toon Army gets in full force at home at the moment, and if they were there in the stadium, I think it would make a difference. I think it's a very difficult place to play as an away team, but ultimately playing too defensively, holding off, and the best example was the game at West Ham at the weekend, where taking a 2-goal lead against 10 men. And essentially nearly giving the whole thing away. And to be honest, the warning signs were there for the week before with Tottenham.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And I think that was 2 points dropped. I know it's Tottenham. I know we shouldn't have been in that position. But with where they're at, how they were playing and how we played in that game and how we set up, genuinely, it was 2 points dropped. And that 2 points would have made where we are now much, much easier with 6 games to go.
Yeah, every point down there is key, isn't it? I wanted to get into a bit more of, how you came to support Newcastle, because like you say, it's always been entertaining football. Kevin Keegan during the 90s, all right, they didn't get over the line that season, but, arguably the best team over that little short period to watch, and probably should have deserved to get some kind of reward for it. But yeah, you look at, you mentioned the start of the season, you looked okay. You're thinking, okay, mid-table, is going to be doable. And as you said, similar to us, key injuries to key players for in terms of the key time of the season, where over Christmas, December, it's relentless fixtures, isn't it? And players like St Maximin with long COVID, it's not ideal for, as you say, for Newcastle. The first 11 isn't too bad, and a couple of signings you made. If you've got Fraser, St Maximin, and Wilson somewhere across that front three, that's dangerous, and that's easily mid-table. You know, that's up there with, for me, you know, Villa and Everton's attack. That's really good. But just like us, if you have one or two injuries to like really key players, it hurts, doesn't it? And you know, you end up becoming this don't lose mentality rather than let's go and win. So I think from an outside perspective, looking at Newcastle, you think, you know, they've accepted that you are where you are. You know, you're not trying to get top four, you're not trying to get Europe. So you understand when they set up against, you know, Liverpool, really good 0-0 with us in the reverse fixture. But I think probably when you come up against the lesser called teams, you know, the West Broms and the Burnleys, and you still go with a back five, you know, it's difficult to defend, Bruce, isn't it? Because you really want to, you feel like you should go for the win in these games.
I struggle with that. I mean, I think the Sheffield United game is probably the best example of that. They've not won a match all season at home. We're going there off the back of two decent results. We've been playing, albeit under pressure. Bruce then decides to play his way. I don't know what the hell he's been doing for the last few years while he's been there, and I don't know what he does. As a coach, I never turn up and don't play my way with the lads. And I mean, that's a farcical comment, but to turn up there and lose in the way that we did and start with a back five, and then thinking that the option was to switch to two banks of four and drop, but you know, one striker very deep and then leave Andy Carroll up the top on his own was, it's farcical, absolutely farcical. And I think there are some other problems there. You know, I do think there's a lack of leadership when Jamal Lascelles is not there. I also have to you know, you've got players like Carl Darlow who performed so well at the start of the season and built a really strong core through the middle. And Dubravka is a world-class keeper. There's no two ways about it. He isn't always consistent, but that's quite common with most of the international keepers.
Yeah.
But why swap him at a time when everything was going well? I understand there's contracts and people, but Darlow had made the most saves in the Premier League and was ultimately probably responsible for the majority of the points we picked up, particularly with the draws. So yeah, it's hard. I mean, you asked about how I came to support Newcastle. I think it's very, very hard growing up when I did watching football not to, I mean, first thing was that I visited the stadium when I was very young. I had the opportunity to be up there and see a match, and I was just blown away. I'd never been anywhere with that kind of atmosphere. Then you combine it with the pitch and the players that were on the pitch, the exciting football, you know, just the history of the club left me in a position where I'd never been so excited about anything in my life as football under Newcastle. Yeah. And for a long time, whether we were a sleeping giant, whether we were up in there and, you know, chucking away the league or finishing third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or even the times we're facing relegation, there's been amazing players that excite. There've been some hidden gems on them and uncovered. And then there's been the good seasons with the likes of signings where you've got Owen, you've got Shearer, and you look at those players, you know, you've got Gillespie, you've got a range of others, David Ginola, and you just think about all the history of players, and you throw in a Laurent Robert who comes out and scores a 43-yard absolute screamer, you know, Demba Ba, Cisse, who, you know, we've had a very mixed bag from the transfer window, but we've picked up some absolutely exciting footballers. And to be honest, if football was just the City way of winning every week and spending the most money, I'm not in for that. But we've had our fair share of downs as well. And, you know, we'll talk about signings, £40 million on Joe Linton for essentially what is a cover midfielder. You know, he's got 3 goals now, so that's a good start.
Mate, honestly, Newcastle must be the most roller coaster club I can think of in England over the last 20 years. They've had, you know, the Pardew years. You've had Cisse and Bar firing you know, towards the top 4, and then you've got Steve Bruce, who, you know, 10 years ago was a bit outdated in his tactics and his styles, in my opinion. You know, being at Hull and Birmingham, and you know, for me, I know he's a local manager. That's where he's from, but for me, like you say, a club like Newcastle, especially off the back of someone like Benitez, it's such a drop off in quality, in managerial ability. But as you say, you know, you've seen it all over the last, you know, 20, 30 years. But I think there's a real parallel between Liverpool and Newcastle as clubs. Like the huge support for both, the history, both got amazing stadiums, and there's a lot of players that have played for both, because obviously the culture, I feel, is actually quite similar as well. You know, if you're drawn to one, you're drawn to the other. It's a very similar feel. You know, you're godlike status, aren't you? If you stick it out and be loyal to either of our clubs,
Yeah.
you know, you're held in the highest regard for, you know, a very long time. So yeah, exactly, mate. I agree with everything you said, really. So in terms of the match itself, obviously this time it's at Anfield. Liverpool are pretty much now in the position that they need to win pretty much every game remaining to get top four. You would think after the last little bit of run, obviously Fulham dropped off a bit. West Brom were a long way behind anyway. You would think Newcastle are safe. So are Newcastle on the beach now, like a Crystal Palace, and there's not much to play for?
Oh,
What you
it's
think
just
the game?
asking for it. I mean, I think where we are is that if we want to do this properly, we need 8 points from 6 games. At
Yeah.
that point, we're safe. Mathematically, ignoring everybody else's results, and you know me, don't take anything to chance.
No.
That's what we need. I look down at the 6 games, and it's Liverpool away, it's Arsenal at home, it's Leicester away, it's City at home, Sheffield United at home, and then Fulham away. And I'm thinking, oh man, 8 points seems massive. But at the same time, Fulham need 15 points out of 5 games if they're to survive anything. So I was looking before, West Brom have really come about themselves, but the gap is just too big. I was toying with whether I put a bet on them to survive, to be honest, because I think that they're a club going in the right direction. They're playing good football. They're playing together. They get where they're at, and they've built that momentum and going into it. The Fulham is a big fixture away at the end of the season, last game of the season, and I think anything can happen there. Are our players on the beach? You see, I think a lot of Newcastle fans would be not surprised, but incredibly disappointed with Bruce's attitude when the international break came about of send them on a holiday, give them a break, as opposed to take opportunities there to really thrash out what the problems are, because there's clearly some things going on that aren't happy. So I think it very much depends on his team selection. Bruce can be quite a very predictive creature, I think, as a manager. He's going to see this game that he potentially needs to send out exactly the same team he sent out last time, play exactly the same tactics, because we drew 0-0 at home, therefore it worked. I think in the last 2-3 games, the reintroduction of really key players, I've spoken to you before about this, Matt Ritchie is one of the lads. He's been there, he bleeds black and white. He, you only had to look at the when we conceded the goals at the weekend, he was the one screaming, and he said, off we go again, it's for trying to make this kids friendly. But he was the one driving it. He was almost like the deputy captain, hidden away in the background. And when Joe Willock scored the winner, he was the first over there. Both hands, double high five, massive hug. This is a guy who lives and breathes that club, and we've sat him on the bench despite whatever's been going off the pitch. This is a guy who's been with us nearly his entire career, and he's come through. He's demonstrated time and time again he's got the quality to play there, and it's just been ignored. So if Bruce goes back to the team we played last time and brings back in Lewis and a range of other players and adopts the same system, I think we're going to be in trouble. If he sticks to a very uninspiring formation that he's had recently, but with the players in there, I think they can make the difference. And particularly, I'm sorry to mention it, I feel more assured that we might get something out of the match with the performance of your forwards at the moment. The Liverpool forwards aren't firing.
I completely agree. It's a really good point you make on Ritchie, because Jordan Henderson is our version of that. That obviously he's captain as well, but he's the voice. And I feel, look, especially the Leeds second half, we were missing a leader on the pitch. We were missing a voice, because I mentioned on one of my other videos that nobody drops below a 7 out of 10 when Jordan Henderson's in their ear. He just doesn't allow it. And when we went on that ridiculous run at the start of last season, we were just an absolute winning machine. When you get in that wave, it's so easy to just keep doing it and you believe that you can win. And as soon as a couple of bad results creep in, suddenly Jordan Henderson's not there, Van Dijk's not there. Wijnaldum's captained at times, who obviously very well from Newcastle, and we both rate him very, very highly. But for me, I don't think he's that same kind of character in terms of a captain and a leader. He's brilliant, energetic. He leads by the way he plays, but I don't feel he necessarily improves others around him. James Milner is, the closest thing we've had, and we've seen him feature quite often in the last couple of games. But again, he's playing 90 minutes away to Leeds, and they've run more than any other team this season. Calvin Phillips, for me, was man of the match in that game. And the further that match went on, we had Thiago, Wijnaldum and Milner in midfield for 90 minutes. They're all in their 30s. They've got Calvin Phillips. They've got 2 or 3 young, hungry attackers, Jack Harrison. And then as soon as one of them dipped, they brought on another 21-year-old. And, they really grew into that game. So, as you mentioned, the strikers, when we're on top, that's where we've cost ourselves this entire season, I feel. We've given away more points from winning positions this season than the last 2 combined. So it's taking your chances when you're on top. Not starting Mo Salah against Leeds for me was absolutely crazy. That game was perfect for him, but at least that gives me confidence that he starts against you guys. In terms of who plays up front with him, I think Jota probably continues in some way, whether that be from the left or through the middle, and then it will be one of Mane or Firmino, I feel, up there with him. But yeah, other than Salah, we've not really had a consistent scorer. Jota's was very good before he got injured, and initially when he came back, he was pretty good. He's dropped off a little bit now, but you would hope he could pick up some goals. So, in terms of a prediction, I think we can get the win. I would be, I'd be killed if I didn't say that, but I think it's going to be a really tough game. I'm going to go 1-0. I think it's going to be, maybe a Salah penalty, something like that. I think it's going to be a really, really close game, limited chances, and one little bit of quality maybe could separate the teams.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think if Bruce is brave, well, not brave, simple, and goes back to what he's done the last 2 games, he sets us out. It could be a very similar game to Leeds. We're not Leeds, but when we get going, we play our football. We have the ability like them to create chances. And what has been good about Newcastle in probably the last 6 matches is you can see them still trying and pushing no matter the result. So if he sets us out with, the solid back 3, the 2 wing backs, 3 in the middle, 2 up top, and that includes, and this is the big if, that includes Almiron, St Maximin and Wilson, then I do think I'm going to go slightly different. I think it'll be a score draw. I think it's going to be 1-1. I can definitely see Liverpool going ahead. I would always put my money on Salah to be the person putting that ball in the back of the net, as you know, in those really tight games. But I don't think if he plays Richie that Salah's going to have it his own way. That's a player who will work for 90 minutes and just run. And he's probably going to get booked. It'll be close if he doesn't get sent off if he's up against Salah for the whole 90 minutes, because Richie's not the youngest player, but he's passionate. But I think it's going to be St Maximin again with a sneaky goal. Wilson is always in there for the goals, but I just think St Maximin at the moment has a point to prove. He's coming back into form. He's clearly recovered from the long COVID that was knocking him off. When he first came back into the team, I said to you, I was just so surprised at his lack of movement. He would go in bursts. Last 2 games he's played where he's been in the squad, he seems to have almost limitless energy. And all being well, the knock he took in the game before with West Ham, he's able to overcome that and play the full 90 minutes. Because I think if we don't have him starting and Wilson playing, I think there's going to be some serious problems.
Yeah, I think you need a couple of those together, don't you, to trouble us? Because you look at the Leeds game with Liverpool, Matt Phillips was missing through injury. I don't know if he's back for this game or not, but him and Kabak have been quite solid in terms of what we've had for the rest of this season at centre-back. That's been our most consistent, most successful combination. And when we lose Fabinho from the midfield, as we saw against Leeds, we tend to lose the midfield battle, especially as time goes on because of the age of the others. So I agree. It's going to be really interesting to see if Bruce decides to go for it with a Wilson and Almiron, St Maximin against, maybe Fabinho at the back, Kabak or someone like that in there. I think we could be in trouble. I think you could cause us some problems.
See, I'd prefer you to have Fabinho in the midfield and we just have Nathan and Kabak at the back, because I genuinely think if you've got those 2 centre backs, I don't think they can cope with Almiron and St Maximin. In fact, I think they'll be completely exposed on the pace. The other thing is neither of those 2 players know which direction they're going to go at any time. It's one of the things that's exciting about Newcastle. It's been a theme. You just have exciting international players who just want to have fun with the ball. The other one I'm not so sure about is Jacob Murphy. I think, I've liked his passion to get back in the team. And he's another little sort of sleeping giant. When he wants to put that ball in, he's shown this season he knows where the net is. And I do think if Kabak and Phillips are playing at the back, and you've got Robertson who pushes too far forward, Murphy can be quite a lazy defender, and I'm a bit worried on that side. Whereas with Richie on the other side, I'm pretty confident he's going to do a good job. But if you lose the ball there, and Murphy is going to carry on being as greedy, I do think you're very, very open, especially with those three players we've mentioned, with St Maximin, with Almiron, but also with Wilson. You know, Wilson's an intelligent number 9. You know, he will drag those players out and call the foul. And Kabak has shown that probably doesn't have the intelligence there yet, but he's definitely, you know, I do rate him. I can see the potential. I know you have a different view. Whereas if you've got Fabinho at the back, he's a very intelligent player and reads the game really, really well. And I think that will frustrate us incredibly.
Yeah, it could bail us out, you know, because Fabinho's got that little yard of pace as well. I feel enough, you know, not necessarily the fastest player, but he's got long legs. He's very Van Dijk-like in his build, isn't he? He can get his body in the way over a short distance. You know, he can see it out for a goal kick and stuff like that. So interesting. So I'm going for a sneaky 1-0. You're going for a score draw.
I'm going for a score draw, and I'm going to say it's going to be Salah and St Maximin.
Yeah, it's interesting with the pressure. Is the pressure less on Newcastle now and more on Liverpool? Will that play into it? Obviously, especially after the Super League drama that we've been seeing. What kind of mindset are the players in as well?
I don't think we can be in a position where Mike Ashley is leading the charge to criticise how owners behave in the Premier League. I just don't think we need to go there. I mean, I think the interesting thing for me is, and I think Newcastle know they're not done yet. I think if they get another 3 points, then I do think that the foot will come off the pedal. As I said, they need 8 points to be absolutely assured at this stage. And you know, if Fulham were to achieve 15, I can't see Fulham achieving 15 with their run either.
No, not the easiest.
But what I would, you know, I think the interesting thing for me as well is, I don't know if you saw the news today that and yesterday with John Joe Shelby. So John Joe Shelby did a team Zoom call called the Zoom Army for the NUFC website. And it was a bit of an own goal, really, because they basically put him on there with the ability for anyone to ask questions. And a guy called Davey, who isn't me, I'd just like to say, absolutely tore him apart. And his opening question was, why are you so lazy? One of my biggest frustrations with John Joe Shelby is he does run and he does work. But when it comes to tracking back, there's been countless goals this season, and we've spoke about this, where John Joe is the player who's lost his man. And he does run back to the point where he's on the screen at the bottom showing up that he tried to run back. But if he had put the effort in consistently. So John Joe Shelby came back and said, well, look, you know, the stats don't lie. If you look, I work as hard as everybody else. But maybe it's my body language. You know, my body language is quite negative and I don't look that inspiring. I think he's under a lot of pressure to perform. And when John Joe first came to the club, I mean, please don't get me wrong. It's a bit like yourself when you get down to the 4th or 5th captain choice. I don't think John Joe is a natural leader. Shelby is not the person who inspires the team. There are better players within that team who have a better history with the club and in my opinion, earned the right to be a captain. They haven't just demanded it in the absence of Lascelles.
Yeah.
But I think Shelby's under pressure. And the one thing I was excited when he came to the club is he does have pedigree. He has played internationally, particularly at youth level, and he can play passes that rip defences apart. And when you have Callum Wilson, St Maximin and Almiron up the top, and even Fraser if he's fit, there's a good chance. But I think the battle in midfield will be interesting to see who wins, and I think that will dictate whether it is a win, draw, or loss at the weekend.
I do. I'm hoping we put a little bit more energy in there, because obviously Naby Keita's been dropped in here and there and not really worked. I'd like to see
put him on, bring him on. We'd love you to start with Keita instead of Thiago, you know.
Oh dear, I'd like to see Oxlade-Chamberlain in the midfield three, personally.
Yeah, you see, I wouldn't. If I was a neutral, I'd really enjoy that. But I think Ox poses a challenge in that middle area. You know, he's still got a bit of pace and he's got a lot of skill.
Yeah, I agree. I like to see a bit of a mixture in that midfield three. You know, our most successful three last season was Fabinho, Henderson, and Gini. That has everything. You know, you're looking at Milner, Thiago, Wijnaldum. You know, they're all kind of a similar age. If you chuck an Ox in there, you've then got a box-to-box midfielder as well. So I think you have to have a bit of a mix, you know, in there. So it'll be a very interesting game. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Just touching on John Joe Shelby, of course, we used to have him back in the day. We picked him up from Charlton. And clearly there was a reason for that. You know, he was a young, talented footballer, but I agree. Every time he's kind of had his chance, he's just kind of, whether it's, you know, his own personality, He's let himself down a couple of times, some silly red cards, but he's got that quality. You know, at Liverpool, it was too early. He wasn't ready for Liverpool at that time, and I personally wasn't a fan. But as you say, since he's left Liverpool, just afterwards, he's really gone up to that point. He is just starting to have a bit of a Dele Alli kind of drop off again. But I agree, if he sorts his, you know, his actual personality out and his attitude, I think there's absolutely still a player in there. So yeah, I agree. Midfield is definitely the place to look at it.
I think it's where it's going to be lost and won. You know, I've already spoke quite a lot about Almiron. I really like the guy. I think he puts in a lot of effort. He is a bit like a busy worker bee sometimes, where he's flying around and it leaves gaps. I think Isaac Hayden being out for the season is a massive loss, because I think that would make a big difference up against the likes of Ox and Thiago. I don't think Shelvey's got the defensive ability. However, Longstaff being back in the team has made a big difference in terms of his work rate. He hasn't performed spectacularly in going forward. You know, he's not done well, but the work rate he's put in and the amount of interceptions and tackles and tracking back and covering has been great. So I'm hoping Bruce sticks with the formula that he's put together. As boring as it can be, I hope he tells him to go play football. You know, I hope he sets out with three at the back, Murphy and Ritchie wide, and across the middle he's got Longstaff, Shelvey, Almiron, feeding Wilson, and Sir Maximan, you know, exactly the same layout. And I'd like to see Joe Willock off the bench, because I think there's going to be a time when a few get tired. And we've got 6 games that are cup finals for us if we want to stay up to some degree. So rotation is key. Other than that, we haven't got a lot left in the tank in terms of subs at the moment.
That leads me on to my next question. Obviously, we might have another 4-3. You know, the old Keegan hanging over the sideboards. But in terms of, you know, there's, from an outside perspective, maybe not inside, Newcastle do look like they're going to be okay. But the Fulham game at the end of the season shouldn't make too much difference. That, you know, Fulham really need to turn out a champions 5 games to have any hope whatsoever. But looking into next season, mate, do you see Steve Bruce at the club? Do you see any players potentially arriving? What kind of positions you're really missing? And whereabouts are you looking at finishing in the league next season? Is it again, would you take 17th right now, or is it time to look up rather than down?
So I think there's something that you know, there's a big cloud over something that will make a difference to that response. You know, the takeover's still there. You know, there's still the appeal. There's lots going on. I think Newcastle is, you know, anyone who's played Football Manager, anyone who's played FIFA, anyone who's watched the club for the last 30 years knows there's always a takeover on the horizon, and it very rarely happens. I think this year the takeover discussion seems to be quite genuine to a large degree. The issues around ownership and the fit and proper persons test and the money being evidenced. And as a Newcastle fan, I get quite frustrated. You know, we don't particularly want to enter into that market after having Ashley, but to be honest, you know, we Jeff Bezos isn't going to come and buy us, is he? You know, and invest billions of pounds. So the reality is, I think if we remain under the current ownership, I do think Bruce survives. I've seen some very frustrating interviews, particularly after the Tottenham game, where people in the media who, you know, they know football better than me. They've played it, but I disagree with giving him another season, because I actually think he's shown time and time again that he can get the team to perform. But then as soon as the pressure's off, he returns to very boring, lazy football where he's trying to protect a 2-0 win. It's not how we want to play football. You know, as a Geordie, we don't want to sit there and watch boring football. We don't want to park the bus. There's a very good reason Mourinho hasn't even ever been touted to us, and that's not because he wouldn't come to us, because we don't want him. We don't want that style of football. It's not how we play. Right. The other reality to this is that if we don't sell the club, who is going to come in? There's some discussion today about Chris Wilder being the next, you know, going up the ratings as the next favourite to take over Newcastle. So if we don't have a new owner, then I see us staying largely as we are. There's a number of touted sort of signings going out there. So I was reading up on this a bit. You got the Benfica's Nino Tavares, who's, you know, been said at 25 million. But again, he's a left back, you know, he's a left wing back. And we're sat there thinking, well, we just brought Lewis in to fill that position, and we've got Ritchie. So to some degree, unless he is going to be world class, well, why did we spend the money on Lewis? And, you know, I think he needs time. I think he can do it. And all the other signings are centre backs. And I think there is some space in the centre backs. I think we've got a lot of dead wood that needs clearing still on the team sheet, but we haven't got a huge squad. So if we stick with the current owner, he will stick with Bruce. He's, you know, he gets, to be fair to Bruce, he's done a reasonable job with poor resources. He makes some bad decisions, but overall, we haven't been relegated yet. You know, fingers crossed. I would really like to see us change manager, not because I have a particular issue with Bruce. I just think he doesn't get what the club want from him. You know, being a Geordie himself, he should know what he want to play football. And he's shown us he knows how to do that. He's shown us he knows how to set them up and fire up the team for first half performances or even comebacks. But as soon as we get 1 or 2 goals in front, we should just carry on pressing, because it's the best form of defense is not to let the opposition have the ball. And that's how we play football. So this constant switch back, it's got to go. If, however, we do change hands, then I'm really hoping it'll be a bit like Leeds, you know, where we talk about sleeping giants. You know, Newcastle, we as fans, we get berated about, oh, you think the club's much bigger than it is and all the rest. Well, no, we don't. We follow a passionate club who is been there or thereabouts the whole life of the Premier League, bar one season, which we won't talk about. But we've always played attacking, exciting football. We've taken chances on signings that have or have not worked out. We've brought some really attractive players in. We've fed the likes of Arsenal, Tottenham, and yourselves for years with really quality midfield inspiring players and some defenders as well. So I just want to see us with a manager. I mean, Benitez was the best we've had in a long time. And I'd give anything to have him back. I think most Newcastle fans would. I'd also give anything for a different option that met our way of playing, but I don't know who that is right now, to be honest. And I don't know who would come to Newcastle under both our ownership and with the finances available, because I think it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really hard gig, isn't it? You look at it and you think you're almost doomed from the beginning, aren't you? Newcastle's expectations is to play well and be successful, or at least more successful than they have been. And as you say, it's almost one hand tied behind your back, even both at times. You know, the budget isn't always there, and suddenly they'll make 40 million available for Joe Linton, and you think, oh, that could have been better.
You just have to look and wonder what happened there. You know, if you've got 40 million pounds, there's plenty of opportunities within the transfer market at the time to pick up other players. You know, Adam Lallana was going around at that time for a very, very cheap fee. And whilst he's an older player, he would have made a big difference. Hopefully, though, if nothing changes at the top, it does look like we're very interested in Willock if it's not silly money. Arteta hasn't really said he wants him back. His comments about the positivity in scoring were very much, oh, I'm really pleased he's out on loan, said the loan would be the right thing, but not, we can't wait for him to come back. We got big plans for him. So I think that would be a smart bit of business, depending on the cost. If that's the position, I won't accept 17, Adam. I'll take it today. If you could tell me that's where we're going to finish now, at least. But, you know, we should be pushing under the team we've got and the squad we've got. And Bruce, for all his faults, is an experienced manager and he can set the team out to perform. And we have had some, you know, of course, some upsets this year. If we play like that consistently and injuries go our way, I think it could be different. We should be 13th, 14th. But if we really are, if we are sold and we do move on to different ownership and we bring in the right manager and we spend a bit, but we also clear out to fund that. You know, there's a lot of players that we could move on. But similarly, we've got a lot of young players coming through. You know, Newcastle are in the FA Youth Cup quarter final, and you've got Elliot Anderson banging goals in the reserve games and in the cup games. That means we can get rid of Carroll and not worry about renewing that contract. As much as that kills me, because I do have a soft spot for him. He's just not there anymore. But if it's that, then we should be pushing for 10th and higher. You know, we should be trying to ease into some European slots. I know people are going to say that, but absolutely delusional. But in 2 years under new ownership, we should be in there or thereabouts 10th and up, you know, with minimal investment, to be honest.
I agree. You know, Wolves have come up from the Championship and done it. Leeds are currently 10th and drawing with us. Aston Villa, again, have not been in the Premier League for that long. They return and they're all pushing top 10. So there's absolutely no reason. Like you say, it starts from the top. Get the right owner, get the right manager, get 1 or 2 different players in. You know, the difference that 1 or 2 players can make, and it shouldn't be that much. But, you know, look at Jack Grealish at Aston Villa. Look at the difference he makes to that team. You know, when he was injured, they went from about 4th to about 9th. And, you know, they're still going to have a good season, way more than they would have ever expected. But as you say, if you get 1 or 2 key players in good form over a period of time, you know, if Callum Wilson plays 38 games with someone setting him up, he's scoring 20 goals for me, you know, consistently. He's a top player.
And with, you know, you got St. Maximan, you got Almiron there, you got Richie. who obviously can score a goal. Murphy, who's shown he can find the net. We've got Fraser, we've got Hendrick, we've got a lot of options there who have scored goals, and they will come on to score goals. So we've got a decent number 9. He's not. He's not. He's not going to play for City. But as far as I'm concerned, I think he's a quality number 9. He knows his role. He wants to play for the club. He's passionate about it. You don't need another out-and-out striker. There's other players that will score goals. I think if we were to change things up and we were to get Lascelles a quality, and I mean a quality partner at centre back, we can change to having 2 at the back, and we can be more expansive and play wide. We've got good wide players. We've got enough. But I think one right-sided midfielder and maybe a central midfielder who's a good ball-playing box-to-box player. That might be Willock. He might come of age. But I think there are other options out there as well. 2-3 players, different owner, and to play with a very clear remit of playing entertaining football again, which is what it should be, not trying to seek a point or a draw. We'll take a loss, but if we perform well.
Yeah, you want to see the Newcastle identity that you fell in love with as a fan, and every other fan is from the outside looks at Newcastle, and that's instantly what I think. The players that you read off, the Ginolas, the Roberts, the Barr and Cisse partnership, Obafemi Martins, Shearer, Owen, what couple of players those are. So just to finish off, mate, because that was really, really interesting to get a Newcastle perspective from a Newcastle fan. Just the last 5 minutes, obviously the world of football over the last 48 hours has been painful, crazy. Twitter's been going mental, but just in terms of obviously Newcastle, who weren't invited to the very special club, just sort of a 5-minute wrap up, mate. What have you made of the last Super League, all of this business?
Well, I mean, you know what I did. On Sunday, I was watching, as you do, watching Sky Sports, and Gary Neville. I'd obviously missed the conversation when it had come out in the release. Gary Neville went off onto it, and as the game progressed, I completely lost any appetite to be involved in anything to do with football for any further in the weekend. I turned everything off. I obviously did some reading. I cannot understand. I think there's a level of duplicity going on. I think the Premier League needs to be very careful about swinging hooks at people going, threatening the FA and FIFA over how you're going to play a league for your own financial gain. Well, I'm sure that's what the Premier League did when it was first formed, and there was a level of it. The difference then was the timing and how they conducted it. For me, the European Super League feels like an elitist group of owners who are behind closed doors deciding how they're going to make their money back that they've lost in the last 2 years, and how I think, if we're honest, and you won't appreciate this, but this is how I feel. You have to look at FSG and the Glazers and other people in that group. Those type of owners are thinking, right, 2-3 years, good solid income, stable income that is astronomical. It's going to exceed the club's income from any other year, and whatever the consequences probably don't matter from a footballing perspective to you and me as a fan, to the players who potentially couldn't play for their international team, earn any rights to do anything else. That's not how the owners think. They're thinking our income stream's sorted, we can spend big, sell shirts, fill stadiums, travel the world, and then sell at a huge profit if you look at the NFL type model of how this is. I was really surprised that Abramovich and Sheikh Mansour were involved in that. I can understand they didn't want to lose out, but it didn't really make sense. Those guys aren't there, as much as I hate them and I don't appreciate people buying a competition. I do think that surprised me, because they're people who've invested in that club. Abramovich has been there 18 years. Sheikh Mansour, Abu Dhabi is on the map because of their sporting partnerships. They're not looking to sell those. These are fulfilling the dreams of what those owners wanted to do, and they're fully committed to those clubs, and they invest accordingly and they support them accordingly. I was mortified that a club in Liverpool, and not to pick on you, but
I agree,
a club
mate.
in Liverpool who complained about the amount of matches that were played in the season, the level of injuries, the pressure on them, the requirements of the player was going to enter into a competition that was essentially going to double the amount of games that you were playing in any competition, and with significant travel, significant international travel at that, or European, sorry.
Yeah.
And then we saw the fans come out, and I think that for me was a really good feeling, that for once I didn't feel disconnected from what was going on in football, because there's a lot of times that something happens and we all have different opinions, depends where we stand, where we sit, And that's a beautiful thing in football, is we can all disagree, but we all have a point that's valid. I saw very few comments that weren't aimed at, well, hang on a minute, you guys have all started at the bottom of the pyramid at some point in your life, and you've worked your way up, particularly City. You've worked your way up. And now you're at the pinnacle of the career, and you're going to shut the door behind you so no one else can come back in. You know, you look at Leeds, you look at West Ham, you look at other teams that really, you know, Leicester is a great example of that, as you said. Everton, to some degree, you know, not to be horrible, I know you'll appreciate that, but, you know, they haven't always been up there as a European force or anything else. And you think, wow, you're going to shut that door, you're going to remove all that funding. I mean, do I want to go to a Newcastle match where Newcastle are playing Watford every week, or Burnley or Brentford or Hull or Derby, for example? Well, of course I'm going to support Newcastle, and of course I'm going to watch it. And I'll watch any football that's going on, but I came very close to saying, do you know what, if this goes ahead, I don't care if it's Amazon, Netflix, Sky Sports, BT Sports, the lot will be cancelled, no matter how much that will damage to me. So the fans coming up was great. The players with their comments was awesome, you know, to see that. I mean, Petr Cech yesterday in the crowd was just that. I mean, he's a club legend at Chelsea, an amazing goalkeeper, an ambassador of the club, and to break ranks like that in the way that he did, but also to make sure the fans didn't get into trouble to the best of his ability, to try and shepherd that away. That's what football's about. I'm disappointed that more managers weren't able to speak freely, but you can entirely understand their position.
Tricky one.
You know, Bruno Fernandes probably went as far as he could, reposting a shared tweet and going from there. I do feel bad for Liverpool. I do feel bad for Manchester United and the other clubs. You know, I very rarely feel bad for Arsenal for many reasons, the same with Chelsea. But I feel bad that the players and the managers have had to put up with the torrent of abuse they've had for something they're clearly not involved in. Everyone's talked about greed, and I don't think I need to go into that. But for me, taking competition out of the sport is the single greatest of what's the point of carrying on. Because you could spend £300 million on a player just to fill your stadium and sell shirts. But Real Madrid have done that before, and it hasn't led to them continuing to win titles. In fact, you know, generally that team of Galacticos was built by buying good players on the up, but also surrounding them with young talent and some very old members of, you know, experienced old firm boys. You know, it would be abhorrent. It would be the death of football as we know it. And, you know, for teams in the lower leagues who have got ambitions to be, you know, the next Leeds, to come back up, the next Leicester, it just closes the door. And the Premier League would become incredibly uninviting, I think. Our representation in Europe would have been very interesting, because I think based on this year, as we discussed, you know, it wouldn't be the teams you expected to see there.
That's right.
I'm not sure I agree with the docking of points and banning. I think when the conversation was that we didn't know how else to fix this, a really, really hard message from all the authorities was welcomed. But I did feel for the players. You know, you've had to play a game which you've played against Leeds, come away with a 1-1 draw. There's no way that it didn't affect you. We saw it again with Chelsea last night. You know, it must be horrible. But I think it's really, really simple. If people don't get the message that football is for the fans right now, and that message goes to Mike Ashley and the other owners as well. You know, if you think this is potentially the end of the road and that's been dealt with, and it's only, you know, the Glaziers and other people that have to worry about it, what I would say is, if you're Mike Ashley, if you're a chairman of a club or an owner of a club, and you haven't yet got the footballs for the fans, I think we're going to see a monumental turn in that tide now going forward. And I hope the horrific 72 hours we've had changes how fans realise they have a voice and an influence over their club and the sport we love.
I think you're absolutely spot on everything you said, mate. That's the perfect way to come to an end, I think, because like you say, no matter who's in charge of these big clubs, player power, managers, legends, and ultimately fans will not let anything that's detrimental to competition and to the game that we've loved for over 100 years ever come into disrepute. So perfectly put by you, mate. I couldn't agree more with everything you said. And again, just really appreciate you coming on. Obviously,
that's cool.
We're very close. You know, our own sons are in each other's teams. We're both football coaches, so you know, we're always talking about current affairs and everything else. But yeah, I've really enjoyed having you on, mate. Obviously, we'll get
my pleasure.
A big shout out as well, just to you, mate. Everyone that watches the Southern Scouts. So David is everything behind the camera. You know, all the effects, the intro, every thumbnail. So massive thank you to you for that.
It's a pleasure, and I appreciate being here today. You know, hopefully it's the 1-1 draw and we can still remain friends. If it's 1-0 and you cause us to be relegated, we're going to have conversations. The only thing I do want to do is just like a little plug. I have to say, as a Liverpool fan, you must be really proud of Jordan Henderson's approach. I don't expect anything less from him because of the player we know he is and the person we know he is. But as we're on a Liverpool podcast and that's what we're doing, I do want to say I think there needs to be more captains in football and representatives within the the PFA and others that go about it that way. No messing, came out and said it, and I think I just need to acknowledge that.
No, I agree. We were live on the Red Sea podcast last night as Jordan Henderson dropped that that red square of "You'll never walk alone. We're not interested," and every single Liverpool player then retweeted the same picture. And as you rightly say, mate, he's not just a captain of a football team. He's a captain of football, isn't he? He's galvanized 20 captains to come together and thought, guys, this without us it doesn't happen. So let's all get on the same page. And yeah, exactly. An absolute leader, someone that I think should still be at the head of the England team as well, in terms of captain. But that we'll leave that conversation for another day, I think.
I think it's best not to talk about England, Liverpool selections, isn't it, really? But no, it's absolutely. Thank you for having me on, mate. And all I hope for is an entertaining game of football at the weekend that we can discuss for the rest of the week.
Exactly, mate. I look forward to the game, mate. And as I say, I'm sure we'll see each other soon as well. So take care, mate. Been a pleasure. It's been the Southern Scouser guys. Thanks for watching. Take care.